Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Law of Attraction life coaching podcast. And I wanted to talk to you today about post-traumatic stress disorder, which is really common, but seems to be something that a lot of people don't recognise that sort of normal people have. It seems to be something that people think that people have, and kind of relate it to people who have been in military and post-combat. And often we hear about veterans suffering from PTSD, but actually PTSD isn't just something that is reserved for people who have been in combat and who are in the military. Actually, most people suffer from PTSD at some point in their lives if they have suffered a traumatic event. So if you don't know me already, I'm Laura and I am a life coach. I specialise in helping people with anxiety and depression and just kind of changing their lives over, doing a whole 180 to go from being where they are at this current moment in time to being happy and fulfilled. And I use a lot of the techniques that I've developed on myself that I've also used with a lot of other people and a lot of my clients, and they've been really successful. So I hope you stay on board and have a listen. And if you like what I'm talking about, maybe give me a little subscribe by hitting that subscribe button, and click the bell if you'd like to get notifications for any time I bring out a new video. I really appreciate it if you do this for me, because this helps my channel to flourish and it helps me to help more people, which is my path in life, so I really appreciate that. So back to today's topic. What is PTSD? So PTSD stands for post-traumatic stress disorder, and this is something that you can suffer from if you have been through any form of traumatic event. Okay, so traumatic events could include, abuse of some form, rape, attacks, being mugged, things like road traffic accidents, people that have, grown up in traumatic or violent environments, so domestic violence, abuse, emotional, physical, all of these things can set off a post-traumatic stress reaction. And it's very common. Even women that have gone through traumatic labours, this can trigger off post-traumatic stress disorder. And neglect or the other side of abuse, when as a child, anything that would fall into the idea of what trauma is. So post-traumatic stress disorder is very common. 1 in 3 people who have suffered a traumatic event will suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, and it's not something to be ashamed of. You can often feel feelings of isolation with post-traumatic stress disorder, irritability, depression, anxiety, often feelings of guilt because people feel like they shouldn't be feeling the way that they're feeling. There's other things that can come on from PTSD, such as things like agoraphobia, or a phobia of engaging in the behaviours that led to the event of trauma. So for instance, if you were in a car accident, some people can find it very stressful getting back into a car when they're suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder. It could be something as easy as going to a place where you've been attacked or mugged. If you've been mugged outside of a nightclub or something, you would probably have an issue with going to a nightclub and possibly walking around late at night on your own. So this is something that is very common, and I think a lot of people kind of are fearful about speaking about it, actually, because there's this association with military people. And I think when you think about going into armed combat warfare and then comparing that to dealing with something like an attack or something, or a mugging or whatever, people can look at it as being kind of quite minimal. A road traffic accident, they could say, my traumatic event is less traumatic than somebody who's been in the military, so maybe I shouldn't talk about it. Maybe I'm not allowed to speak that I suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. And what I say about that is that all trauma is relative. If you had to live a very peaceful life and then your cat dies, that could be the most traumatic event that you've ever been through, but that level of trauma is on a is on a same scale as somebody who had a very traumatic life and had been to war or something. Trauma is trauma. Post-traumatic stress disorder is post-traumatic stress disorder. It doesn't matter what has brought you there, and it's completely relatable. So how can we deal with post-traumatic stress disorder? Well, there's a few therapies that are very, very helpful for post-traumatic stress disorder, and things like it are recognizing the fact that you've been through the trauma and working your way through it. Now this can be done with hypnotherapy, it can be very helpful, and talking therapies and cognitive behavior therapy, or CBT. These can be very, very helpful to people suffering from PTSD. Other things that you could do is eye movement desensitization, which is EMDR, which is a process of talking therapies included with a rapid eye movement therapy. And this has been seen to be very, very effective with post-traumatic stress disorder and people that are suffering from traumatic events at some point in their life that is causing them to have issues in their life. And you'll go into kind of a trance state and you'll do a process of a rapid eye movement, such as when we're going into the dreaming stage. And this can be very, very helpful for removing the feelings of trauma and the feelings of inability to deal with it from the person who is having the therapy. And you can find EMDR therapists probably just by googling, that EMDR, or maybe having a chat to your doctor. They'll probably be able to provide you with maybe some local practitioners as well. Another thing that is helpful is EFT, or emotional freedom technique. Now this is a technique that is using tapping on meridians in the body, where we tap through, and as we are tapping through the meridians, what we would do, it's up here, above your eye, by the side, underneath, on your lip, chin, above your collarbone, and then one sort of just under your armpit. And as you're tapping through, you'll be talking about the thing that you're fearful of. So perhaps, I'm frightened of getting in a car because I feel like I am going to be in a car accident again. Okay. And then it's about taking yourself through the process of releasing that fear and recognizing that cars are actually very safe, and that you were just unlucky. So finding a way of kind of working through the process of your trauma. But this is very helpful. You can find EFT practitioners. Again, just Google EFT practitioner in your area, and you could probably go and have 10 sessions, probably not even that many, maybe 3, and you'll actually find that can help to release some of that stagnant energy within your body. So talking therapies like counselling are very helpful. Going and seeing a coach of some form, a trauma coach, or a life coach, or whomever. This can be very helpful for releasing some of that anxiety that's built up. So symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder are things like anxiety, suffering from nightmares, having triggered thought processes. So, for instance, somebody braking harshly if you've been in a road traffic accident, or, somebody raising their hand quickly like this to do something and you flinch because you've been in domestic violence. These are triggered actions that are very much inbuilt with the trauma that you've experienced. And being able to work through these are really potent and really important. So other things that people can suffer from is insomnia. Now that can be caused by nightmares, or it can just be caused by the fact that the mind is always worrying and they're on a heightened alert. When you suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, you tend to be suffering from a high cortisol, high alert. So your autonomic nervous system is always in fight or flight, and you have an active fight or flight reaction in effect, which is really damaging for your health. This is something that causes people to have hardened arteries, high body fat, inability to level their blood sugars, stress, irritability, sensitivity to loud noises, all sorts of things. These are all triggered off by having a fight or flight reaction. And actually it's seen that people that suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder have a much higher reaction to cortisol. So most people, when they suffer, a stressful situation, their cortisol will kind of rise like this and then slowly will dip back down. But people who suffer with post-traumatic stress disorder, what happens is that they get this peak of cortisol and it stays high for much longer before it drops off. And this causes people to be in a very high stress reaction system. So you're in sympathetic nervous system for far too long, and this is this nervous system that is exclusively for fight or flight reaction. And when your sympathetic nervous system is working, your parasympathetic nervous system, the nervous system that is responsible for rest and digest and autophagy and cleaning out cells that need to be cleaned out, dead cells, and the processing of rejuvenation and regeneration within the body, this can't take place when the sympathetic nervous system is alerted. And so this is where you start to see people really deteriorating in their bodies and aging much faster, gaining weight, not feeling healthy, not feeling vibrant. And this is all to do with the stress reaction. This is all to do with having high cortisol present in the body. So other than that, things like agoraphobia, as I said before, an inability to do things that surround the incident. So, avoidance of patterns. So how can we help ourselves if we are suffering with PTSD? So other than going and seeking out talking therapies and actually facing your issue head on, what people want to do with post-traumatic stress disorder is actually avoid the thing that gave them the trauma in the first place. They often put themselves in a situation where they're avoiding getting into the situation because they feel a lack of control. So they feel that they weren't capable of changing the outcome, and so they try to find ways of changing the outcome by not partaking in the behaviours that led to it. So say for instance, you were raped walking home one night. The things that the people would do would avoid going out, that they would ensure that they weren't wearing the same types of clothes as what they were wearing at the time. They wouldn't behave, they wouldn't partake in the behaviours. But the point about this is actually that, not partaking in the things that led to the trauma wouldn't have actually made any difference, because it wasn't the victim's fault why something had happened. The same thing that, you could never get in a car again to avoid having a car accident, but this is kind of throwing the baby out with the bathwater kind of ideology. And it's done because people don't feel like they have a control around the situation that happened, which is true to a point. Things happen in life that are negative, but the thing that you do have control over is the way that your brain works and the way that you deal with the fallout of the situation. And so what's really important is actually tackling that trauma and the drama of the situation head on. So what we do is we don't shy away from things. We don't go into avoidance behaviours, because it's these avoidance behaviours that cause people to actually kind of start to become controlled by their PTSD. So people who are suffering from nightmares, they just might not go to bed. They might try and stay awake as long as they possibly could do. People who've been in road traffic accidents, they may never get back in a car again. People who've been raped in the evening, walking home from a club or something at night time, they may never go out after, after dark. And these are avoidance behaviours that actually lead the person to be controlled by their fear and to be controlled by the PTSD that they're suffering from. And this causes so many more problems for themselves, because actually what they're doing is that they are kind of packaging up their lives in things that they can do and things that they can't do, which is really quite sad, because they're already suffering. You don't want to suffer from having less of a life than what you were having before the trauma. So what's really important is actually facing your trauma head on, and it's important to do this probably with somebody that is able to hold your hand and understand what's going on, so a psychologist or a counsellor or a doctor or a therapist of some form, because actually facing your fears can be quite traumatic, but facing the fear in the moment is less traumatic than living a life of half a life because you're frightened of doing things. So whatever the trauma is, it's about going back and revisiting the trauma and recognizing that you've done nothing wrong, because often there's feelings of guilt, like if you'd done something different, if you'd behaved in a different way. Sometimes it's just really accepting that it's just bad luck. And I know that sounds glib when people are talking about, being raped or being in domestic violence or whatever. It is just bad luck, and really there's not much that anybody could do to avoid certain things. It was just a case that you were unlucky in that moment to have to suffer that trauma. So something that's important is to face it head on and almost to kind of work through the trauma. Hypnotherapy is very powerful because it can take you back to the incident and allow your mind to kind of relive it. And the thing is, once you've relived it and you've worked through it, you don't suffer from it anymore. But you actually have to face that thing head on. It's that often, the shadows on the walls that look like demons and we run from them. But actually, when you turn around and you look at it, you recognise that there isn't a demon there. And it's a bit like that. It's about just trying to face your fears head on. Now, post-traumatic stress disorder is quite complex, so you can have things like drug therapy can be quite helpful when supporting you in trying to move on from the trauma, whether that be something about looking at kind of beta blockers to help calm the autonomic nervous system, or antidepressants to help to raise your serotonin level so you're feeling a bit stronger in that time. But things like, you know, ashwagandha and rhodiola and adaptogenic herbs can also be very helpful in dealing with the stress reaction, because you're often in your sympathetic nervous system, which does a lot of harm to the body if you're in it far too long. And then, you know, taking process to hack the nervous system. You know, I don't mean taking a chainsaw to it, but, you know, making sure that at as many moments in the day that you are attempting to re-establish the balance in it. And so you are taking moments to take deep breath and meditation and focusing on bringing yourself back into your parasympathetic nervous system and bringing that rest and digest, because this will help to calm things like high blood pressure, you know, high cortisol levels. It's high stress response in your body, and then when you calm that down, it's easier to deal with things like anxiety and nightmares, insomnia, and the other side effects. So it's kind of a threefold attack. You know, it's about facing the issue, facing the trauma that you went through, and you can do that through talking therapy, through hypnotherapy, through EMDR or EFT, counseling therapies. Being able to hack your nervous system to ensure that you are in the parasympathetic, the rest and digest system, much more than the fight or flight, which is talking about doing exercise, eating well, drinking enough water, taking deep breaths, meditation, and calming that down, taking good, deep, long breaths and finding time to rest and relax. And then ensuring that you are doing something like looking after yourself in the highest levels of self-care that you can do, and just be honest about what you're suffering from. You know, sometimes people can accidentally jar people with post-traumatic stress disorder, and they don't recognize it because they don't understand that you are suffering from PTSD. You know, things like loud noises or, you know, sudden movements or things can trigger people. You know, certain things that people talk about, films, documentaries, whatever, these things can trigger off people and have flashbacks from post-traumatic stress disorder that could be really, really jarring. But it's important for you to be able to be honest about the things that you're suffering from, and it's not just a case that, you know, you didn't go to war and so you're not, you know, allowed to suffer from PTSD. That's a load of nonsense. You know, you're allowed to suffer from the things that you're suffering from, and you don't need to have a level of trauma to be able to engage in what you're having to deal with. So just, you know, be honest with yourself, be honest with others, and if it's getting too much, please go and ask for help, you know, from whomever that may be, whether it's a friend or, you know, a professional. So post-traumatic stress disorder is complex, but when we face the problem head on and we deal with the fear and the anxiety that we're feeling, actually the beast is kind of released, as it were, and we don't become fearful of that thing anymore. When we try to run away from our problems, they get bigger. And so it's having that confidence and also speaking to a professional that can really lead you through the process to ensure that you're dealing with your effects of PTSD. And when you can come out of your fight or flight and into the parasympathetic nervous system, you'll find, like, more often you'll find that the symptoms begin to remedy themselves, and it's easier to face the stress of the trauma head on, because you're not feeling a stress reaction all the time. So good luck with it. Keep fighting, because you can thrive and not just survive. And I promise you that. I've suffered with PTSD after having a road traffic accident and also traumatic events in my life. And, you know, it is something that once you become aware of it, it's like once you name the beast, then, you know, it's much easier to get rid of it. I don't know what it is, like a Rumpelstiltskin kind of metaphor there. But you can do anything in your life, and you can find the right people that can help you through. And if you need any help or advice, or you liked this video, please feel free to leave a comment below. Share it with anybody that you think would find it helpful. If you want to get in touch, my personal email is down below in the About section, and I'd love to talk to you guys. I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being part of my path and my journey to help as many people as I can in my lifetime. And thank you for watching. Thank you for spending this afternoon with me, and I send you all the love that I have and all the brightest blessings for you to be able to work through the thing that you're struggling with at this moment. And just know that if I can make myself better, you can make yourself better too. So keep having faith, keep working hard, and keep doing you. Much love. Have a good day.